call, please.
Mayor White,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, Councilmember Martinez,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Ortiz, Councilmember Tipton.
Present.
Thank you. We've got a quorum.
All right, very good. Move on. Habits are hard, right? All right, will you all please stand for the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Agenda review.
No changes, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Public comments is next, but I think we'll do the public comments after the president. Item F, new wastewater treatment plant status and process. Presentation, please.
Good evening, Mayor White and council members. We're coming before you tonight to give a presentation on our wastewater treatment plant design and upgrade. There's some history behind it, and we want to just make sure that the council is up to date with where we're going, where we were, how we're moving along. And along with me, I would like to make some introductions. Immediately to my left, I have Tony Nisich. Sorry, I do that every time. He is with M&S Engineers, and he's our project manager on the wastewater treatment plant design. So he's the lead on that. And then next to him, we have Curtis Lamb. He is with Hydroscience, and Hydroscience is, you may recall, was awarded the contract for the design of the wastewater treatment plant. And to his left is Marvin Rose, and Marvin Rose is a consultant for the city. And he's been helping for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years.
Two.
Two?
Seems like.
Oh, seems like 5 or 6, sorry. 2 years with our wastewater treatment. He has lots of background and comes from the wastewater industry. And he's very invaluable on a lot of the processing and many other things. So we're going to have Tony speak tonight. I did provide a slideshow to you in print, so you can also see it as we move along. And then there's also another document. It's called this time schedule compliance plan, which we might be referring to. And so we wanted to make sure you had a copy of that as well. So Tony is going to start us out with some history of how we got to where we are today with our wastewater treatment plant design, and then move on from there to where we're at today.
Great.
Tony?
That's just good. Can you hear me well? I do this?
Yeah, you don't need to.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
I
Okay.
shouldn't have done that.
Welcome, Mayor, Council. Welcome to be here again. There's a long history, and we're going to try to move through it very quickly. Some of you will have heard it before, some of you have not. I apologize for the acronyms you'll see in the presentation. If you have any questions about them, I'll try to cover them, but if I miss them, please ask me, because it can be confusing.
And if I could be added as a presenter, please. Sorry.
No, it's no problem. There you go. Well, thank you. Well, we're going to have the first slide. The first thing is the plant that we're talking about, the wastewater, it has really been built in the early 1950s. There are some other dates floating around, but it really goes back to the plans that I've seen that we have in the staff. We're working on it. Okay.
Yeah, it's not
Well,
letting
it
me.
starts in 1950 and early 1950s, 51, 52, 53 is when the plant was built. And that was the same time they built the first part of the collection system, which is primarily between Apple and Elm, 11th and 4th. That was the part that went in first in the early 1950s. It would make sense. So we're dealing with a plant that was built back then that, as you can imagine, the technologies in the area were much different back then. So since then, there's been a lot of change in the technology, and we've learned a lot about the way the process should work. And I always like to say that the process that we started with originally that comes from nature is the one we're using now. We just try to refine it and make it a little more efficient in a little smaller footprint. But it's still the same kind of process where we kind of break down the wastewater, and there's a biological component, and we have some filtering and things like that. That's really what this does to various degrees of efficiency. So in the earlier plant, we were less efficient, and now we much more efficient with the lake. We kind of got started on this, and as you look at the presentation in 2018, the big way is when we kind of had a series of problems at the plant. We got a notice of violation from the State Water Board that said you need to correct those issues. And we began to work on those. There were a variety of issues, from the ponds not working very well to the digesters not working very well and some of the other things. And we worked on those, and we had various reports, and we tried a lot of ways. And but the notice of violation came particularly with a spill over a breach of one of the boundaries, and the effluent, which is the treated part of the process, went out into the creek area. Never got to the creek, but went out there, and the water board said, well, that's a violation, and we need you to look at that, plus some of these other things we've been talking about. And we did. We retained a consultant who came up with a plan to address the violation, our study. So that kind of started along the way. So we did prepare an effluent study that really looked at and said, what can we do to do better? Number one, we don't want to spill, but also there were some problems with the plant not producing the required standards that were required to meet. Because we do regular monthly reports that say, here's all the various constituents we measured, how we're doing. It wasn't as good as it should have been. And we had ongoing discussions, which led to the notice of violation, some other things. As part of that, we did some upgrades to the plant. The basins, the rapid infiltration basins are the ones that we put the fluid in after it's come through the oxidation basins, which are the first ones. And then it goes into the rapid infiltration basins. That's where it settled into the ground. And that's where we had some problems. And the problem was it just wasn't working. After a while, those tend to get full of sediment and things, and they don't percolate as much as they should. Although in this area we have very good percolation rates, but it wasn't working. So we needed to make some improvements to that. We added some screening to the process to improve that, and we continue to do that today. So moving from 2018 to 2020, we were looking at a series of ways to make it better. So we said, what do we got to do? At that time, the regional board was working on new standards. The permit for this particular plant was last done in, make sure I'm not in the wrong way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
That's me.
We got it first. Yeah, there it is, the wastewater treatment. Sorry. So we said we need a more holistic approach to how we can get to a process that will give us a compliant plant with the state's new requirements. They've been working on that for a while. So because the last permit that we're now not off of was 1978. That's one of the first early generation permits the state did, and they didn't typically have numerical numbers for method and measurements. They just said, do the best you can, kind of a best available technology approach. The environmental groups over the years have said that wasn't a very good approach. We want to come back and look at numbers so we can hold everybody accountable. So they did that. So in 2021, we actually completed our facilities master plan. We hired a firm and looked at all the options available to get us to the new standards from where we are or were then. We spent a considerable amount of time looking at options. And at the same time, we engaged a firm to look at our water and sewer rate studies, because we knew that we haven't done that for 5 years, and it was time to look at that. And with the new operation and maintenance expenses of those facilities, we wanted to be ready. So we proceeded to do that. In 2022, we were continuing to work on improvement of the plant. We retained the FRM company to help us with the operations to see if we could fine tune the many processes that go on out there, from maintaining the digesters and sludge facilities to the ponds themselves. And they helped us a lot with that. And we made some improvements. About the same time as we were doing that, it's called a notice of applicability, which is the NOA issued by the Regional Water Quality Control Board, saying that these new standards that they've developed in phases, they said these are now going to be applicable to the city of Greenfield. So that's when we knew that those are going to be our standards. That was what we're going to have to adjust to. At the same time, we were looking at that. We had come out with the study done by the Corolla Group about looking at options. And it was a traditional type of design, and the costs we thought were higher. We thought maybe there were some alternatives because we were concerned about the cost of the facilities. So we looked at some alternatives to that. The one we found at the time was the MBR, the membrane bioreactor, which is kind of a smaller unit that we thought would be more efficient and more effective and reduce the cost and give us some additional options relative to phasing and doing it on a phasing type of way. So we retained a company to look at that option, and they came back and said, yes, we think we can have a more efficient plan and a less expensive plan and do it quicker. And that's why the council did adopt that approach. At the same time, we then went out and retained the designer. We did an RFP for design and environmental services. We hired Hydroscience to do our plant design, and Denise Duffy Associates to do the required environmental work. Just so everybody knows, when we're going to be subject to funding sources that come from the federal and state government, there's a whole different kind of process that's involved. They call it the CEQA Plus process, if you haven't heard that before, but it's really a combination of various federal standards and federal state standards. And that's where we get the standards, not only to environmental standards, there are some cultural awareness standards, there's Buy American Steel standards, there's all kinds of standards that come down from the federal government that become applicable that wouldn't normally be part of the stuff we would do. And we probably haven't seen this kind of process in the city, at least since I've been here for 10 years that I've been here. We haven't seen it because it didn't apply, because now we're getting this kind of funding. So the other thing that happened, which was favorable, is the Regional Water Quality Control Board confirmed that the city was a disadvantaged community under their provisions for wastewater. They have different standards for water and wastewater. Under the wastewater standards that the state has, they said that they believe the city will comply, and that becomes important in the types of funding that we will be able to get to. Oh yes. So then in 23, just last year, seems like it was forever ago, last year, we completed our rate studies, which the council adopted for both water and wastewater. And then we also completed our REB, the rapid infiltration basin upgrades, which was the disking and releveling of that to make those perform better, to actually percolate. There's a maintenance process they came up with that we need to do and to move the water around and to do that on a regular basis, which we're not doing now, and it's made a big improvement in the operation of the plant. Yes, ma'am.
So I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more on the rapid infiltration basin upgrades. So what we've been doing since springtime is we've actually hired a consultant to do some testing on our soils. And it was recommended that we remove 2 feet out of the bottom of each basin because it wasn't able to percolate. So we had been doing that ever since we got all of the rapid infiltration basins besides one taken care of, which then we used that soil to build up our levee system inside the wastewater plant. And also we did get approval from the water board to use spray irrigation to help evaporate the treated water as well as to percolate down in. So there's multiple things going on to keep this plant running. And I wanted to make sure that council and the public did know that there's quite a bit of work going on to keep our plant running properly now. And then I'll kind of push it back to Tony.
Thank you. The next thing is this, we submitted the Clean Water State Revolving Fund General Information Package. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but there are 4 packages that go with the type of funding we're doing. And the first one is General Information Package, which is just tell me your name and address and where you live and what you want to do. And we did that part. The more technical detail stuff will come a little bit later, and I'll talk about that briefly. At the same time as we were working in those 2 studies that I talked about, the one for the MBR process and the bigger one for that, the whole plan upgrade, was what we told the regional board we'd be doing. And they said, okay, because if you don't do those things, you don't meet our standards. So they adopt what's called a time and schedule order, which means you're going to do these things by this time. And if you don't do those things by this time, you're in violation. So we currently have a time and schedule order adopted, which is, I think, the public works director passed out. So you can see what that's like, what's in it. And that's why one of the reasons it adds urgency to what we're doing today. And in the future, we need to keep moving forward or we run the risk of being in violation of that agreement. Then the next thing we did just recently in 23 was the request for proposals for these packaged membrane bioreactor systems, which are a key component of the design. We also completed the preliminary design report, which I don't want to miss over that, which is a lot of work that really went out and said, here's what we thought was going to be from our preliminary study. But when we started looking at the actual ground out there, we did soil reports and surveys and things. We found a lot of information that wasn't anticipated in the first design. That's one of the reasons we'll have to increase the scope of service of the money for that, finish the design. And we'll talk a little bit more of that in a minute as well. We talked about the proposal for the MBR. We did a lot of work at this particular MBR process. I told the council before is fairly new for a project of this size. We're not aware of anywhere in the country where they've done it to this degree. They've been working on it for a while. The technology's been around for a long time. They've been doing it mostly in industrial applications because it works very well. It's very efficient. Wineries and dairies and all kinds of things that do industrial waste need to have this kind of treatment, and they've been using it for a long time. Now we figured that the technology is ready for bigger applications, and that's what we're proposing to do here. Next one is we continue with the design of the project. We're about somewhere, I think currently we talk about between 50 and 60% design of the whole project, which is why it's critical that we get to the vendor for the MBR unit to be on board, because there's a lot of design that goes around the heart of the plan, if you will. It needs to fit, and it's a lot more information than we would think about, but it's important, and it really helps because a lot of the processes in the plant, as well as things before and after the plant, are based on what happens in that particular part of the plant. So we want to be as efficient and effective. If we didn't do it this way, which is not done a lot of ways, if we didn't do the other ways to do it, we thought would be much more difficult. No, we'd have to put a larger contingency in the construction budget so that the construction contractor would have to figure this all out in his mind. And of course, what typically happens in that case, in our experience, is they have to put more money in for contingency because they don't know, like we don't know. And the only way they can deal with that is by increasing they got to reduce their risk by increasing their allowance. So we think this will give the city better bids than we would have gotten had we not done it this way, which is the main reason we want to do it this way. So we also have to work on completing the application for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund process, but also that's where we think we're going to get the majority of the money. Did I switch things over?
Well, it's got a lag.
So, okay, there we go. So anyway, so we're going to complete the design, which we think now we're about halfway done. Let me complete the funding agreement for the upgrade, and then of course we'll advertise for the project. Looking at that, we think the completion of the design will be obviously dependent on funding. We're expected between 2027, 2028. And again, the intent is to have a full compliant plant at that time. And we still think we can do that. So that's why we're moving forward. But the funding is really important in a lot of ways. Those who, the golden rule about those who provide the gold also provide a lot of rules, and certainly not a lot of rules to go with this kind of funding. So we have to meet those criteria. And now the DFA, which is the Division of Financial Assistance for the State Water Board, told us that we think that'd be most efficient because you're moving forward fairly quickly, and that you prepare a construction application, not a planning application. The other type of grant they do is a planning application. And the problem with that is that would get you to spend a couple of years to approve the planning. Then they'd say, okay, now you can go ahead to where we are right now and complete the construction application. And they just said, well, it's probably more efficient to go ahead and just go right to the construction because you retain the designers, you're moving forward. So we did that. That application has 4 packages, they call it. The first one's a general information, which we have submitted. The next one is the technical, which is where all that, we call it the project design report. That's where all the engineering stuff goes into the study, up how big, how wide, how deep, et cetera. That all goes in there. That becomes the basis then for the project description, which will be part of the environmental review, which we're under review with that right now. And then those two plus the financial security packages, they call it, which is where they're going to ask us a bunch of questions about our ability to fund the plant that they hope to fund. We're going to have to demonstrate that we have the resources to maintain that plant and operate it efficiently and appropriately, and also have enough money to do the other things that are necessary to provide the service that we're charged with providing. So those are all, we're just kind of starting that now, but those are the things we want to get done as quick as we can. I think it's fair to say at this point, the environmental document is the critical path now. We've completed the technical component of that the environmental draft we have now. The only part we haven't been able to finish is the cultural resources section, which we're continuing to work on now, which is in this CEQA Plus thing, there's both a federal requirement and a state requirement for cultural consultation with Native American tribes. So we're doing both those things. And when we finish that up, we'll be able to wrap up that report. That'll become the environmental document, and that'll go into this package for submittal. So we've been in the department, the Division of Financial Assistance has indicated that based on our DAC status and our small city status for wastewater, we believe we could qualify for up to 100% grant funding. And we're proceeding on that manner because we think we will. But of course, the funding agreement will need to be in place before we can go to construction. I mean, that's part of the process. The funding approval process, we think, take 9 to 12 months when we get all these packages submitted, because there are a lot of people in a lot of places that got to read it and comment. And I would expect as part of the first, our first thing we'll get when we do the environmental document, we'll get state agency responses to that. And they'll tell us where they think we're on, we have any major problems. If we don't, then they'll begin to dig into more. But there's, again, that got to move in a lot of offices in a lot of places in the state and at federal level. So that's why the 9 to 12 months. But we'll still be doing work when that's in there, because there'll be a lot of questions to respond and move through the process. So that's kind of where we are right now. I hope we're really good. The next steps we're going to move to was the item that was on the agenda last week that we wanted to give more history and give you a better background of why we're here and why we're there and what we're trying to do. The first component of the item is the MBR procurement agreement. Now, what's different about this is typically when we do a procurement or a bid, we have a final thing that we go and we say, okay, we want that final thing, and here's all the specs and give me a price on it. In this kind of a process where everything is moving at the same time, it's a little difficult to do, because in this case, this piece of equipment, which again is the core of the treatment, needs to fit with all the other stuff we're doing around it. And it's very difficult without putting contingencies elsewhere in the process, which means more cost, to get that done. So that's why we have this procurement process, which we've run through the state, and then they're happy with. We're doing it this way. It's done other places, not often, but you don't have very many processes like this. Phase 1 of this procurement process is the $150,000, which is a set in the RFP. It gives them some money to help meet with the design team and actually facilitate the completion of the total design with their project, because they'll have to make some adjustments in their process as well. This gives them money to make that and to move forward and keep the process moving forward. The second phase is phase 2 is the price to procure this process, which is the MBR units themselves and everything that goes with that in the package that will connect to all the rest of the plant. That's the $30,933,900 and $70.91. That's a lot of money. But one thing that we want to emphasize in the procurement agreement, there's a section that talks about that this part is not effective until we actually issue a notice to proceed or notice to fabricate the equipment. So even though we're fixing on this price, it doesn't. We don't owe the money until we actually issue them to a notice to proceed. And that wouldn't normally happen until after we've awarded the contract to the general contractor. Then we would transfer the agreement to that contractor, And then when that was completed, the contracting data with those guys, then we would issue the notice of receipt. So that's quite a ways off, but it's important because it's a lot of money. So we want everybody to know that the city's not going to be committed to the $31 million until we get to the phase. And hopefully we wouldn't issue the notice of receipt until after we have the funding agreement with the state in place. So, and that's normal process. So that's the first part of the next step. The next step also, we talked about the expansion of the scope of the project over time. We have a request from the design team for another 647,000 for all the additional items that have been added to the design since we started. And those are listed in the other agenda report in some detail. There's a letter about those, but it's primarily the soil work that was done. They said a lot of the soil needed to be removed and recompacted. So we have to do that. There's the issue of the part of the plant being in the floodplain, which has to be moved to the floodplain before we can get funding. And a bunch of other equipment. There's some administration buildings, some other things that we think we need to store the equipment. So all that, anyway, it's in the report, but there's a lot of work and it's a lot more work. So I believe the original, it's like 4.26 is the current number
For our agreement,
yes.
It's in about $4.2 million is our agreement, and then with the additional authorization will be about between 4.8 and 4.9.
So that's where we're going. You'll see that in the next slide. And we think that's still a reasonable price based on the stuff staff has reviewed it. We think it's worthy, and that's why we're recommending it.
And then I do want to emphasize that that $647,000 proposed amendment to the contract, that will all be reimbursable from the state, depending, of course, on the amount of the funding that we do receive from the grant. So we're putting that money up front, but it will all be reimbursable through that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because the first invoice we typically do after we sign the agreement is we send that invoice for all the stuff we've paid to date, which would be several $1 million, obviously, that we think the low is, and that'll take some time. That's critical. The other thing is good, but no matter what we do, any option for funding is going to require this level of effort, or we can't get to, no matter how we're going to fund it. We can't. There are other options, whether it's a financing or a grant, or none of those are available unless we can complete an application. So we need to do that. And that's what we're doing here. So that's kind of wraps up my presentation of getting us to where we are. And then certainly if you have any questions, we're ready to answer.
And before we go to questions, I do want to just make clear this slide here is very critical in the understanding of the financials. I know you're all looking at $30 million, right? Okay, so the ask is for will be for the 150,000 only to be funded to be able to have the MBR company and our designer work together to complete the design package. The $30 million is not on the table for appropriation. We're just looking to have the council approve the procurement agreement for the future. So what we're doing is trying to be ahead of the game. Instead of waiting another year to go out to do the RFP, we went out in advance to do a pre-procurement agreement. There is a CPI increase each year. Whereas if we were to go out and bid this MBR facility into, say, another year or two from now, that $30 million would be a lot more money. And so by only having the agreement to raise by the CPI each year, that's going to save us hundreds, if not a few $1 million. And again, that phase 2, the big number, because we can't get that out of our mind, is not promised to the MBR contractor. If we don't get funding for some odd reason, or our funding's low or something happens, we're not on the hook for that in the immediate. It has to go out to bid to the general contractor for all the site improvements too. And then that's when it would come into play. So if we had to have a full design completed and then there was a hold pattern, we wouldn't be on the hook for that $30 million right up front. It would be waiting. So I want to make that clear. We're not asking to spend that $30 million or to have that money. We're asking for $150,000 to help with the engineering so that HydroScience and the company that would build the MBR plant can make sure to have really quality plans for bid. So I do want to make sure that's very clear.
And I think, just to follow up on that point, because it's critical, we think this is we think the $150,000 is a very good investment for the city because it reduces the risk to the city of increased costs in about a third of the size of the plant. That's why I'm saying it's worth millions of dollars. If you just look at what costs have been for the last 2 years in construction, we're getting some certainty. We're fixing this price based on the CPI until construction. We think that's a significant savings to the city and a reduction of risk that we wouldn't otherwise get. So we feel good about that, and that's why we're recommending it. So, but it is different. It doesn't done very often. I believe the city probably hasn't done. Most cities have not done something like that, but it's out there in this type of procedure. So we're happy to do it. We think it best serves the city's interests.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on this? Is there anybody online?
No.
No.
Does not look like we've got anybody online.
All right. Seeing no public comment, we'll move back to city council discussion. Do we have any questions for council?
I'll start.
Yeah.
So the first question is what is the state deficit? How is that going to impact the rolling fund? Is that going to deplete that, or is that going to make that inaccessible or partly inaccessible?
So I'll answer that. So it's actually completely unknown at this point. There have been discussions at the water board. That's why, we talked about there may be other funding sources too, but nothing's really a guarantee, right? So we don't really have a choice. We need to move forward with this design. No matter what happens, at least get the design complete, because we are currently under a notice of violation. Our wastewater plant doesn't meet the standards that the water board has set for limitations on our effluent and our water going into it. Just there's so many different variables. So whether or not, we were looking about to hopefully have the answer on what will be funded by about the end of this year or beginning of or about January. That's the estimate. And we all know that things have been changing. And so between now and then, we don't know.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I would say that what most of us here, we talk about the state deficit, is a general fund deficit. And this money is not coming out of the general fund. So it's coming out of other restricted funds. And to the degree that makes it harder to figure out. Everybody's talking about that, but this money is mostly passed through from the feds. So what happens at the Fed level, affects us more. So and that's a complicated thing to figure out. But so we're hopeful, is what we say.
You were going to,
I wanted to turn it over to Tony because the Fed connection.
okay. So, and the second question is the $4.9 million for the design services amendment or for the design services contract, that's not included in the 30.9 million, correct? Or is that included in the 30.9 million?
That is not included in the
Okay.
30.9 million. The 39.9 million is for the construction of the MBR plant, the actual processing portion of it.
Okay, so either way, even if this doesn't move forward for some reason, we don't get funding or anything like that, we are still on the hook for the 4.9 million.
Correct.
Okay,
If I could also, so the cover of this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this is one unit of an NBR.
Correct.
Okay, so that's what this is. We're looking at
8 of them,
how many?
well, 8 of these.
8 of these units. That's what you're buying. And this is, I think, you take this in Merced, or is this someplace in?
No, that is somewhere else.
But this is a pretty good example of what the plant looks like.
so the 3 modules there is actually 1 module. The 3 modules that it's showing here in the pictures.
It's one half of one side of a train.
Okay.
What you're getting will be a little bit different than this, but it's pretty representative of what you're getting.
Any other questions? I have a couple questions. How does the dewatering plant fit into this? I know we spent some money on that.
Yes, so
Process.
I was gonna bring that up. So we're in the we do have an interim dewatering plan. We've signed a lease agreement with Ortec for a portable belt press. And we've also have signed a contract for a contractor to do all the temporary site improvements. The actual belt press, the dewatering belt press unit is being shipped out tomorrow to the city. Once it lands here, we'll unload it. The general contractor who's doing the interim site improvements, will come out and hook everything up and get it to a place where we're comfortable. And then Ortec will be sending out a technician for a couple of days to train staff on how to run it. And so that should, after a few weeks of kind of playing with the polymer and how much we need to put in, we should be getting our sludge into a dumpster. It'll be dried. It'll be hauled off by the hauler, and we will be able to then shift down and not have to haul our sludge to Soledad. But it will also, with our digester, it will pull that sludge out of there, so it will start properly working with its biologicals. So we won't be having as many issues in the rapid infiltration basins, because a lot of that gets through and that's clogging up our soils. So this is going to be a huge positive for us in keeping this plant going until we can build the new plant. Yes,
So it's basically these deposits are slowing down the process if we don't get them out of the system, correct?
correct. And we're about, right now we're 3% solids. So we have 3,600 gallon truck that's hauling three loads a week, but only 3% of that is actual solids. The rest of it's liquid. So with the belt press, we should be getting, please correct me if I am wrong, at least 12 to 15% solid.
Probably 15 to 18%.
Yeah, so I was being conservative. So right there, you just think that that's a whole lot of difference. And then not having to haul to another plant
Okay.
and not pay the hauler, pay the other plant to receive it. I mean, we do have the lease agreement, we do have to purchase polymer, and then we will have the disposal and change out of the bins. What we're gonna have to figure out how often that is. And so it's really gonna be a huge asset for us. And in the new plant, there will be a belt press built in.
The $30 million, $31 million, is that one unit or is that 8 units or exactly what are we looking at?
That is for all of the units.
Okay.
And their components.
I don't know, you mentioned the $150,000 for the phase one. The $650,000 is also going to be an ask at the meeting, correct?
Correct,
That's a total of $800,000.
correct.
Do we have the money available for this project?
Well, so we can make money available for this. We have approximately $2.1 million available from our ARPA funds that we got from the feds post-COVID. And we can use some of that money for infrastructure, specifically for the wastewater treatment plant.
That's all I have. Yeah, else have any questions? Sure.
I'm a very visual person, so is it possible for somebody to show me out there? I can go see.
What's going on at our plant currently? Absolutely.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yeah, and if Paul's okay, we can schedule directly.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah, you can just schedule a time with me.
Whatever you just let me know about.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate your being here tonight and nothing else. This will be back on our agenda next week, correct?
Yes, the whole point of this workshop, and thank you very much, staff and our consultants for helping us out, is to make sure that these are big numbers. And we want to make sure that with the uncertainty of things going on at the state level and at the federal level, that we wanted to make sure that the public and council understood that we're pretty much looking at and making sure that we're not getting ourselves into something that we can't get out of. The entire funding of this project is important to us. It's also very important to the state. The state gets a lot out of us using this solution because they will be able to save a lot of money if we're successful in future projects for a lot of other communities. So this is important to us. It's also very important to them. So we will need to make sure that we're dotting our i's and crossing our t's as we go through this, making sure that we're not overcommitting. I mean, there is a possibility, obviously, that we'll have to have some other sort of financing, whether it be bond or some other loan against assets or what have you, in case they don't. But the impetus for the state to really be all in on this, the same way we kind of are, is really big. And we need to make sure we get that information to them. And if in fact there are issues with funding from them, we need to press them every way we possibly can. So it's kind of setting that up, but also letting you know that this item that was on last meeting's agenda and will be on Tuesday's agenda is very well thought out, and we're not increasing our risk level. In fact, we're actually decreasing it.
I did have one more comment. By doing this and moving forward to where we're at, so even if the funding does not come through this year or next year or whatever that may be, shouldn't this put us in a better position to have like more of a shovel-ready type project ready to go funding?
Yes.
Any funding does become available?
Yes, absolutely. It's going to put us at the forefront. It's going to lower our risk, like Paul said. And we're going to be ready. It is something that in our time schedule order, which is, we did provide copies of. If you'd like to go over that, we're happy to do that as well. But we're basically telling the state what we're doing and what we're doing by these dates. So while in our current notice of violation, that we're in hopes that we will not incur any fines. So as long as we stick to that and we're moving forward, then, we're in the good graces because we're trying to make everything in the wastewater plant up to standard. And we are in the same boat. A lot of these South County cities, we have old plants. We have different type of plants. And with the new general order that came out in 2022, or it's from 2020, but it implemented in 2022, we're all doing the same thing. We're all having to design and upgrade, with the exception of Soledad, since they did that not too long ago, about 10 years ago. So it's important, that the public and the council understand how important wastewater treatment is for the city and for the residents. If we kept having issues, we don't want to have that. We want to be in compliance. We want to have an amazing wastewater plant. This plant is, I know I only got to go to one since I was ill the second time. I went to a small one. But everybody here on this panel, and as well as City Manager Wood, toured a MBR plant, and it's amazing. I've never seen anything like it. And it's all stainless steel. It's clean. It processes very well. Everything's above ground. We don't have to go underground to replace parts, motors, anything. And I'm really excited about it. I think I can speak for my reaction at it. When I went to the plant, I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. I had been to one of the manufacturing plants about a year and a half ago, just to kind of see what it was going on. They had an open house, but it doesn't really put it into perspective till you see it functioning, because otherwise it looked like just a big piece of metal. It was one of the highlights of my career, was actually seeing that small plant and how it functioned. So the highlight of my career will be this plant. I've never been as excited about wastewater as I have ever in just dealing with the design of this plant and the procurement process and learning more about MBR plants. And I'm really excited for our community to be on the front lines of innovation. And I believe this is going to be the largest plant that this company has manufactured. So we're also going to be, like Paul said, for the state, if we can process things extremely well, and at a lower cost. I mean, it's gonna be a forefront for all these small little plants in the county, things like that. It's gonna be a huge money saver for counties, cities, the state, everybody.
All right, thank you for your presentation.
I've got one more comment.
Sure.
I'd also like to make sure that everybody remembers that one of the reasons why we actually picked this was the modular design and the capability of future proofing it. So as we do grow, as the city does continue to grow, as we do bring more residential and more commercial, and more industrial in, as we near the capacity of the wastewater plant, all we have to do is add additional modules to it, because everything else will already be there before that. So that was one of our reasons for deciding to go with this plant.
Well, and also as the city's growing, we're gonna be up against the capacity at some point soon. So
Yes,
we need to keep this process moving. So,
exactly.
all right, thank you very much. Meeting is.
Thank you.
Do-